Most people have it backwards. They spend their entire lives trying to control things they can't control. And they ignore the one thing that would actually set them free. Think about your day yesterday. How much energy did you spend worrying about things outside your control? Someone cut you off in traffic. You couldn't control that. Your boss gave feedback you didn't want to hear. You couldn't control that. The news showed something disturbing. You couldn't control that. Someone didn't text you back. You couldn't control that. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher, but he wasn't born into privilege. He was born into slavery. For decades, he was enslaved. His master didn't just work him, he tortured him. One day, his master twisted his leg as a kind of test, and Epictetus calmly said, "If you keep doing that, it will break." His master kept twisting, the leg broke, and Epictetus simply said, "I told you so." No anger, no resistance, no emotional reaction. Why? Because Epictetus understood something fundamental that freed him completely. He understood that his master could control his body. His master could break his bones, make him work, take away his possessions, dictate where he went and what he did. But there was one thing his master could never control: Epictetus's choice about how to respond. His master could break his leg, but Epictetus got to decide whether he would resent his master for it. He could decide whether to hold on to anger or to let it go. He could decide whether the broken leg would destroy his peace or whether he would maintain his equanimity. That, the internal response, was completely within Epictetus's control, and his master had zero access to it. But you thought about all of it. You worried about all of it. You tried to solve all of it. You let all of it affect your mood, and you probably spent very little time on the one thing you actually could control: how you responded to it. That's the tragedy of modern life. We've got the focus completely inverted, and the Stoic philosophers, people who lived over 2,000 years ago, understood this so clearly that their entire philosophy is built around this one principle. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you what they understood. I'm going to show you how to apply it, and I'm going to show you why the most powerful freedom you can experience isn't in controlling more. It's in accepting less control. Let's go. This is the core of Stoicism. This is the thing that, if you really understand it, changes everything. Epictetus taught what we call the dichotomy of control. It's not complicated, but it's profound. Some things are in your control. Some things are not. Things in your control. Your effort, your intention, your values, your response to what happens, how you treat people, whether you keep your commitments, what you decide to believe, how you spend your attention. Things not in your control, other people's opinions, other people's actions, the weather, the economy, your body's aging, whether people like you, whether your efforts succeed, the past, when you'll die. That's it. That's the whole thing. But we live in a society that's completely inverted from this. We spend 90% of our mental energy on the things we can't control, and we spend 10% on the things we can. You can't control whether you get the job, but you can control whether you prepare for the interview. You can't control whether someone loves you, but you can control whether you treat them with kindness and integrity. You can't control the market, but you can control whether you make financially responsible decisions. You can't control getting sick, but you can control whether you maintain healthy habits and how you respond if illness comes. The Stoic path is to do a complete inversion, to spend almost all your mental energy on what you can control, and to completely release your attachment to the outcomes. Here's why this matters so much. When you stop trying to control what you can't control, something remarkable happens. You become free. All anxiety, pretty much all of it, comes from trying to control what you can't control. You're anxious about the future because you're trying to guarantee a particular outcome that might not happen. You're anxious about other people's opinions because you're trying to control what they think about you, which you can't do. You're anxious about your health because you're trying to guarantee that your body won't fail, which is impossible. You're anxious about money because you're trying to guarantee financial security, which isn't actually guaranteed to anyone. All of that anxiety evaporates the moment you accept that you don't control those things, not because you stop caring, but because you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Instead, you focus on what you actually can control, and you do it excellently, and you release attachment to the outcome. That's the freedom. That's the peace. Here's the thing that's tricky about the dichotomy of control. We all intellectually understand it. We've heard that we can't control other people. We know that we can't control the weather. We know that we can't control the past. But we act like we can. All day long. Every single day. We act like we can control whether our boss likes us. So we people please. So we compromise our values to be acceptable. So we spend mental energy worrying about what our boss thinks. We act like we can control whether our partner will leave us. So we monitor their behavior. So we try to be perfect. So we invest enormous emotional energy in trying to guarantee that they won't go. We act like we can control the economy. So we obsess over the stock market. So we panic when there's news of a recession. So we make decisions from a place of fear rather than wisdom. We act like we can control our aging, so we spend money on expensive skincare and surgeries and procedures. So we compare ourselves to younger people. So we feel inadequate because our body is doing exactly what bodies do. The illusion is that if we just worry enough, if we just try hard enough, if we just think about it enough, we can control things we can't actually control. And so we worry, and we try, and we think, and we get nowhere. I want to tell you about someone I knew. His name was David, and David was obsessed with other people's opinions. He was smart. He was talented. He had good ideas. But he was constantly second-guessing himself based on what he thought other people thought about him. He'd come up with an idea, and before he'd even share it, he'd spend hours worrying about what people would think. He'd imagine the criticism. He'd prepare defenses. He'd consider changing the idea to make it more palatable, all before anyone had actually heard it. Then, when he did share the idea, he'd read responses obsessively. He'd notice if someone didn't comment. He'd interpret neutral feedback as criticism. He'd lose sleep over it. One time, someone made a mildly critical comment on something he posted, and David spiraled. He spent an entire weekend thinking about that one comment. He rewrote it in his mind. He imagined who the person was and why they didn't like him. He considered deleting his post. He considered whether he should even keep working in that field. All because he was trying to control something he couldn't control. What that one person thought about him. And here's the thing. No amount of worrying was going to change that person's opinion. No amount of second guessing was going to make the criticism not exist. No amount of mental energy was going to guarantee that everyone liked his work. But David was spending enormous amounts of energy on this futile effort. I asked him one day, "What if you didn't care what that person thought?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "But I care what people think about me. Everyone cares what people think about them." And I said, "Yeah, but caring about it and trying to control it are two different things. You can care about being good at something, but trying to control whether people recognize you as good at something is futile. You can care about being kind, but trying to control whether people perceive you as kind is futile. You can care about your work, but trying to control whether everyone likes your work is futile." The moment David realized he couldn't control what people thought about him, and that he didn't need to, something shifted. He stopped second-guessing his ideas before he shared them. He started sharing from a place of, "Here's what I think is true," rather than, "Please like this." He stopped reading every comment and response obsessively. He'd share something and then move on. He started focusing on the one thing he actually could control. Whether he was doing good work, whether he was being honest, whether he was showing up with integrity. And paradoxically, once he stopped trying to control other people's opinions, his work improved. And people responded to it better. Not because he was suddenly worthy of approval, but because he was no longer performing for approval. He was just being honest and doing good work. This is the trap we all fall into. We think that controlling external things, other people's opinions, outcomes, circumstances, is the path to peace. But it's the opposite. The path to peace is to accept that we don't control those things, and to focus completely on what we do control. Okay, so you understand the principle. You understand that you can't control what you can't control. You understand that it's futile to try. But what do you actually do about it? How do you apply this in real life? The Stoics gave us a framework. It's simple but powerful, and it's called the Dichotomy of Control in practice. Here's how it works. Step 1. Identify what's in your control. When you're facing a problem or a challenge, the first thing you do is identify what's actually in your control. Let's say you're interviewing for a job you really want. What's not in your control? Whether they hire you, how many other candidates are competing, what the interviewer's mood is that day, whether they have budget to hire, their internal politics and hiring criteria. What is in your control? Whether you prepare thoroughly, how present you are in the interview, whether you're honest about your experience, whether you ask good questions, the energy and intention you bring, how you handle tough questions. The Stoic focuses 100% of their mental energy on what's in their control, and they completely release attachment to the outcome, whether they get hired. This is radical, because most people do the opposite. Most people focus most of their energy on the outcome, "I need to get this job," and less energy on the thing they actually control, the quality of their preparation and performance. Step 2. Do the work with full commitment. Once you've identified what's in your control, you do it excellently. You're not doing it to guarantee an outcome. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You prepare for the interview not because it will guarantee you get the job. You prepare because you're the kind of person who prepares. You prepare because showing up unprepared would be disrespecting the interviewer and yourself. You prepare with full commitment. You're not half trying and hoping for the best. You're going all in on the things you can control. Step 3. Release attachment to the outcome. This is the hardest part. After you've done all the work, after you've prepared and shown up with full commitment and integrity, you have to let go of whether it works out. They might hire you, they might not. And here's the key. Either way, you've succeeded. You've succeeded because you did the thing you could control excellently. Whether they recognize that or reward you for that is not your business. This is completely different from how most people approach things. Most people do the work, but they're attached to a specific outcome. They're hoping, they're anxious, they're waiting to see what happens. And once the outcome is determined, they feel good or bad based on whether they got what they wanted. The Stoic does the work with full commitment, and then they're at peace regardless of the outcome, because they know they did what was theirs to do. I want to tell you about something that happens when you truly, deeply accept the things you can't control. It's not dramatic. There's no moment where suddenly everything changes. But slowly, subtly, things shift. The anxiety doesn't disappear overnight, but it starts to lift. You stop checking your phone obsessively to see if someone has responded. Not because you don't care, but because you realize that refreshing your message app 50 times isn't going to make them text you back any faster. You stop lying awake at night worrying about your health, not because your body is suddenly perfect, but because you realize that anxiety isn't going to prevent illness. You can control taking care of yourself, but you can't control whether your body gets sick. You stop obsessing over whether people like you, not because you become callous, but because you realize that trying to control their opinion is like trying to hold back the tide. You can control being kind and honest and showing up with integrity. Their opinion is their business, not yours. I want to tell you about my friend Sarah. Sarah was dealing with anxiety so severe that it was affecting her life. She couldn't sleep. She was constantly stressed. She was experiencing physical symptoms. Her stomach was always in knots. Her heart would race. She tried everything. She tried therapy. She tried medication. She tried exercise and meditation and all the advice people give you for anxiety. And nothing really worked. Or it worked temporarily. But the anxiety would always come back. Then she read about Stoicism, specifically about the dichotomy of control. And something shifted. She realized that almost all of her anxiety was coming from trying to control things she couldn't control. She was anxious about her job security, which she couldn't control. She was anxious about whether she was healthy, which she couldn't control. She was anxious about whether her relationship would last, which she couldn't control. So she made a decision. She made a list of everything she was anxious about, and for each item she asked, "Can I control this?" If the answer was yes, she made a plan to control it well. If the answer was no, she wrote it down as something she was releasing. For things she couldn't control, her body's health, her job security, whether her relationship would last, she decided to stop trying to control them. But she decided she could control how she took care of herself, the kind of employee she was, the kind of partner she was. So she shifted her focus there. She started taking care of herself not to guarantee that she wouldn't get sick, but because taking care of yourself is what a responsible person does. She started being an excellent employee, not to guarantee job security, but because being excellent is who she is. She started being a great partner, not to guarantee the relationship would last forever, but because being loving and honest and present is the right thing to do. And something interesting happened. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it became manageable, because she'd stopped trying to control the uncontrollable. She told me later, "I feel like I'm finally allowed to just live. I don't have to guarantee everything's going to be okay. I just have to do my part and trust that it's enough." And her life was radically different. She was more present. She was more productive. She was actually happy. Not the kind of happiness that depends on everything working out perfectly, but the kind of happiness that comes from knowing you're doing what's yours to do and releasing the rest. This is what happens when you truly accept the dichotomy of control. You don't suddenly become invincible. Bad things still happen. You still face challenges. The world is still difficult. But you're no longer wasting enormous amounts of energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You're no longer anxious about things outside your control. You're no longer performing or pretending or compromising yourself in hopes of controlling outcomes. You're just living. And it turns out, when you stop trying to control everything, you actually have more peace, more freedom, more life. I want to be very clear about something. Understanding the dichotomy of control isn't a way to be passive. It's not a way to stop trying. It's not a philosophy of resignation or defeat. It's actually the most empowering philosophy I know. Because once you understand that you can't control the outcome, you're free to fully commit to the process. Think about it. Right now, most people are holding back. Most people are not fully committed to what they're doing because they're hedging their bets. They're afraid of failure. They're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of loss. So they do things half-heartedly. They prepare partially. They show up with one foot out the door. Because if they fully commit and it doesn't work out, then the failure is more real. The disappointment is more intense. The judgment is harder to bear. So they protect themselves by not fully committing, and they achieve mediocre results. The Stoic does the opposite. The Stoic fully commits to the things they can control, to the quality of their work, to their integrity, to their effort, while being completely accepting of whether it results in the specific outcome they wanted. This paradoxically makes them far more successful, because full commitment produces better results. Full presence produces better work. Full integrity produces better relationships. You don't get better results by holding back and protecting yourself. You get better results by going all in on what's yours to control. And here's the other thing: freedom. Real freedom, the kind the Stoics were talking about, isn't about having no constraints. It's not about being able to do whatever you want. Real freedom is freedom from being enslaved to things outside your control. Epictetus was a slave. He had fewer external freedoms than almost anyone. His body wasn't his own. His time wasn't his own. His possessions weren't his own. But he was free. Because his mind was his own. His response was his own. His values were his own. And he taught that the free person, the truly free person, is the one who has accepted the things they can't control and has focused on mastering the things they can. Compare that to someone who seems to have everything external: money, power, status, but who is enslaved to what other people think about them, enslaved to the need to maintain their status, enslaved to the fear of losing what they have. Who is more free? The person with external constraints but internal mastery, or the person with external freedom but internal slavery? The Stoic would say the first person is more free. And I think they're right. When you understand the dichotomy of control deeply, you get your freedom back. You stop being enslaved to other people's opinions because you realize you can't control their opinions. You stop being enslaved to outcomes because you realize you can't guarantee outcomes. You stop being enslaved to circumstances because you realize your character doesn't depend on your circumstances. You're free to just be, to do your work, to live with integrity, to show up as yourself. That's the promise of the dichotomy of control. That's why the Stoics structured their entire philosophy around it. Here's what I want you to do. Right now, this moment, think about something you're stressed about, something you're anxious about, something you're struggling with, and ask yourself, is this in my control? Not partially, not if I really try. Genuinely, can I control this? If the answer is yes, then stop worrying and start working. Focus on your action. Focus on your effort. Focus on what you can do, and do it excellently. If the answer is no, then let it go. Really let it go. Accept that this is outside your sphere of control, and shift your focus to what you can control. In response to this situation, that one practice, that one act of honesty about what you can and can't control, can change your life. Because the moment you're not wasting energy on the uncontrollable, that energy becomes available for what actually matters. That's the freedom the Stoics knew about. That's the freedom that's available to you right now. Let me end with this. You came here probably looking for a way to feel better, a way to be less anxious, a way to have more control over your life. And the answer the Stoics give is counterintuitive. It's not about having more control. It's about accepting less control. It's not about achieving more. It's about releasing attachment to outcomes. It's not about being stronger. It's about accepting what you can't change. But here's what happens when you actually do that. You become free. Not the kind of freedom that comes from being able to control everything, but the kind of freedom that comes from accepting you can't control most things. It's the freedom to be yourself without performing. It's the freedom to do your work without being attached to whether it's recognized. It's the freedom to love people without needing them to love you back in the same way. It's the freedom to pursue excellence, not for external validation, but because excellence is who you are. It's the freedom to face hardship with equanimity, because you know that what happens to you doesn't determine who you are. Epictetus understood this. Marcus Aurelius understood this. Seneca understood this. And now you do too. The dichotomy of control isn't a philosophy for achieving more. It's a philosophy for being more. It's not about controlling your life. It's about being free within your life. And that's available to you right now. Not someday, not when you achieve something, but right now, in this moment. You're free to focus on what you can control. You're free to release what you can't. You're free to live with integrity regardless of outcomes. You're free to do your work and let go of the results. You're free. That's the gift of the dichotomy of control. That's the wisdom of the Stoics. And now, you're ready to live it.